This is a community conversation podcast, so what you can expect is for the first 45 minutes or so, it will be podcast style between the host and the guests, and then the second half of the show is reserved for you, our community, to join us with your shares, your wisdom, your insights, and your support. So please just put your hand up when we welcome audience participation, and we will get around to you and welcome you to the stage with us. Just a few quick reminders before we begin. You will have received and acknowledged all of our disclaimers when you register to join us in this show. However, just a few high-level things to remember. First of all, this is not a drug marketplace, so please don't offer, please don't ask. Secondly, this is a community and a family that supports and encourages each other. So please do keep your shares respectful and also relevant to the topic that we're discussing today. And finally, we're here for harm reduction and education only. You are responsible for you. So please do seek medical or mental health advice and support if you're choosing to use psychedelics for expanding your consciousness, for healing or growth. And also be aware of the legalities in your own jurisdiction and make sure you're making safe choices. Without further ado, let's go forth to learn, listen, share, and flourish. Good morning, everyone who's here with us in our live audience so far this morning. And hello to everybody who's listening to the replay on the Psychedelic Revelations podcast. Today, I am really, really honored to have what I would consider a friend and a colleague, Mikaela de la Myco here joining us, de la Myco joining us for one of her many times joining us with the Flourish Academy and Psychedelic Revelations podcast. First time in this new Zoom format that, let's just put full disclosure out there, Wendy and I are still like mucking around with the tech in the background. And I was sharing with Mikaela before we even started that my heart's thumping a little bit. It's not about the conversation, it's about the tech in the background. So bear with us as we figure all this out. Super, super happy to have Mikaela here to talk with us today about rematriating entheogens and restoring right relationship. This is for me as a psychedelics educator, as a psychedelics guide, being at the intersection of psychedelics and spirituality and science for so many years. I find that this is such an important conversation. For me personally, how can I be in right relationship with these beautiful plant medicines, these plant teachers, with the land, with community, with their historic origins, but also how can I, as an educator, lead from a place of rematriating entheogens as well. So I'm really, really happy to share Mikaela's insights and learnings and education with everybody, for everybody, and also really, really personally for myself at this, in the role that I play here. So hi, Mikaela, and welcome to the show today.
It's good to be back. I think this might be my fourth time on the podcast. So yeah,
Wow.
happy to be continuing our relationship here with this conversation.
Thanks, Mikaela. Yeah, your teachings are very valuable to our community, and I really appreciate that. Before we dive in too deep, I'm just going to step back for just a minute and do as we always do, which is just a little bit of mindfulness and presence before we dive deeply into the conversation at hand. So I invite you, if you're here joining us live, if you're listening to the replay, if it's safe for you to settle in comfortably to your chair, your bed, wherever you're sitting or lying down, closing your eyes if that's accessible to you, if that feels safe, and just taking a moment to lengthen and deepen your breath as you just become aware of this beautiful prana life force energy flowing through your body with deep inhales and exhales. Not trying to change anything, just bringing awareness and inviting a softening if there's anywhere that feels ready to release. And as we turn our attention from our breath to gratitude, I invite you, if it feels right, to put a hand on your heart. Maybe a smile to your face as you bring to mind the things in your life that you can be grateful for. We all have so much to be grateful for. And turning our gratitude down to Mother Earth, who gifts us with sacred plant medicines to expand our consciousness, to learn and to grow. Sharing that gratitude out to the land that each of us personally is on, to the land, to the ancestors, the elders, the indigenous people who came before us on those lands. I'm so grateful to be here on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, with gratitude to the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh. Thank you so much to our elders, ancestors, and those who've come before us and who have over time shared the beauty and the mystery of these plants with us. So with presence in our bodies and gratitude in our hearts, I invite you to come back into the conversation as we move forward today with Mikaela de la Myco, speaking about rematriating, entheogens, and repairing relationships. And I think we're gonna start at the definitions just to get those clear. But before we do, Mikaela, as we do at the beginning of every show, we stop to just kind of tap into our own gratitude and just to give you a moment to acknowledge anyone or anything, mentors, teachers, plants, spirits that have really supported you in your journey and in having you be where you are and doing what you're doing today.
Thank you, Dana. I want to yeah, I want to give thanks to all the folks who've held me over these years of growth. I mean, I've known y'all for since I was like a little baby educator in this space. I think I did my first proper presentation in Utah, and you were there. And I just yeah, I just want to give thanks to all the people who have poured into me, my teachers, the schools that I've been a part of, the hard lessons that I've learned along the way. You know, yeah, at this time, I think I would like to keep their names like in my heart, but I'm looking out at these trees, I'm looking out and hearing these birds, and I'm just very grateful for the little nest that I have here in Southern California in Kumeyaay territory. And I think I just want to just bring the acknowledgement around land acknowledgement, that I think land acknowledgement is a really great start to a lot of our practices, but it is so important to go beyond just saying names and acknowledging the land that you're on. And, you know, I hope that this conversation is an actionable place, right? To learn, you know, how not to just do the surface level work, but to be the blood, sweat, and tears, to be in the movement of, you know, supporting, liberating, advocating, making room for, pouring into, pouring our efforts back into the land that gives us all so much, and the teachers that have given and maintained and preserved even what we have today, like even the little that we're able to pull together. And so I hope that, and I pray, and where I'm situated in is that I hope that today is inspiring and supports next steps for people who have been curious about integrating this as a practice.
Thank you so much, Mikaela. And I love how that gratitude wove from people to plants to nature to challenges that we've been through as well. And you know, one thing that I think I've really learned over my years in this space, and yeah, I love that you brought it back to where we first met back, I think it was 2021 in Utah. We're both little baby educators. You know, I've learned that, you know, it just goes so much farther beyond gratitude and ceremony, which is an ongoing learning and lesson for me. But you know, it's really about relationship. It's about restoring our connection to the lands, to the lineages, and to the living traditions that these sacred plants come from. um, and remembering that, also remembering that healing isn't just personal, but it is collective, it's cultural, and it's ecological. And I think that's really a lot of the framework for our conversation today. But let's go back to actually defining what
Exactly. Yeah.
matriarchal and matriarchy is, and also entheogens. Some people may not really understand what we're
Mhm.
talking about with entheogens. So why don't we start there?
Yeah, I love that. Like when we bring this conversation forward, and I say, in the effort to rematriate entheogens, we have to kind of go back to the definitions. And I think in unearthing the definition and talking about the definition, we already start, the teaching begins, right? And so I love starting here. So rematriation and entheogens. And it's so funny, Dana, that you were like repatriation, because if you type up or try to type up rematriation or to rematriate, it will autocorrect to repatriate. So that even is just like this undercurrent that we're living in around the general worldview of what it is to restore a person home is repatriate, right? But in this movement, in this definition, rematriate and rematriation came out of the indigenous land back movement, which is, like the continuation of the rich legacy of the American Indian movement, as supported by so many incredible thinkers like John Trudell, for example, and to basically hold the United States accountable for its treaties that it has set up with many different tribes, and claiming land sovereignty as a part of that. So occupying Alcatraz Island, and claiming, like, we have the right to be here undisturbed, and as a sovereign nation. And so land back movement is not just acknowledging the land that we're on, but quite literally returning and restoring like homelands back, because many native groups, families, tribes, whole swaths of people were marched across the what we call the United States continent, this land, and moved out of their ancestral homelands that they'd occupied and lived with, in relationship to, in harmony with, for some 11,000 years, even, right, up to the Younger Dryas. So it's like, restoring relationship when we have a land-based spiritual system. There's an amazing book called the Spell of the Sensuous. It's around a sensory experience of the earth. And so the author talks deeply about land-based spirituality, and a spirituality that is rooted in the ecology of an exact location as being the birthplace of a people, as being where people learn and have their cultural stories intact, where their language comes from, with the exact ecology and the landscape of their homeland. And so when we talk about rematriation, it's about also restoring like the consciousness of a people that have been displaced. And so it's a big action, and it's going to take so long to really restore and heal that wound. But it takes the responsibility of, the United States government to like remember that they broke treaties and agreements that they'd made to make sure that these people would never be run off their lands, and that is in fact what did occur. So rematriation comes from this land back movement to restore, in my definition, rights, roles, responsibility, and respect to the caretakers of land and ecology. And it's important to remember that as we're facing climate crisis and the crisis of land grabbing and displacement all over the world happening today, right now, that indigenous nations and stewards of land have been largely responsible for maintaining the health and well-being of the planet. I often visualize it like there's the bulldozing machine, Fern Gully style, who's about to come and take over the forest. There's the forest and all of its many relatives, animals, plants, waterways, soils, and then there's native people in the middle defending. Like Native folks have always been right on the edge of nature and the war machine. And so, oh, I can't believe we weren't recording that. Oh, Lord have mercy. So,
We're live streaming though, so hopefully,
prayers up. But yeah, Indigenous folks everywhere, and it's happening at Rastafari Indigenous Village right now. Double Blind put out an article about you know, they're building roads, infrastructure. This is what it actually looks like. It looks like pummeling old growth forests and then putting in highways. This is what this looks like in modernity. And so rematriation is not just this, this philosophical idea around restoring rights, roles, responsibility, respect, resources, but it's in fact being an ally in the movement of restoring nature and its original caretakers in our areas. And Indigenous folks and Native folks are not just like for the history books. They're here everywhere, maintaining, keeping in time histories, stories, processes, and it's important to ally, to be also in relationship with living people, human beings who are continuing to fight for the magic of nature. And so that's rematriation, in my opinion and in my view, and how I like to practice, or I like to think about my practice. And then there is entheogen. So entheogen is a terminology that comes from the McKenna family, Terrence and Dennis. And Dennis, I think, coined the term. If please correct me if I'm mistaken in that. But entheogen broken down is en, theo, and gen. So en is within, gen is to generate, and theo, and theo, n is in, theo is the godhood or the spiritual presence, and gen is to generate. So en, theo, gen is to generate the God within. And so we're talking about entheogenic substances. We're talking about plants, animals, beings in the natural world that support the generation or the acknowledgement or the expansion of this spiritual principle within either the human body or otherwise. I find that this happens through relationship. And so entheogen, I think, is a catch-all for me, because how do you delineate the ability of a plant or an animal or an element to generate a God within that is limited to psychoactives, right? Because for me, there isn't a huge difference, or there is not this hierarchy for me around, we have DMT and ayahuasca and San Pedro and all of these master plants and teachers like high up at the top. And then we have like the humble chamomile and rose and nettle down here at the bottom. For me, all of these plant lives have the capacity and have their own spirit and have their own animacy and their own godhood. And when you interact with them, that they can open that space within you, that you can sit with a plant and learn deeply from them in a way that expands the spirit and makes you aware of the spirit that is teaching you and the spirit that you have. So entheogen, I would like to say, I expand that definition to also include many members of the natural world. And to rematriate entheogens is to essentially bring the focus and concentration to the movement, the lived experience, the allyship with Native people, both in a land-based way to restore and to support the restoration of Native people to land, but to also restore the, the living body of Native folks, or to care deeply for the plight, to care deeply for the the quality of life, which includes reproductive justice, which includes housing, which includes these other features like human rights, basic human rights. And so when we bring this consciousness into this space of entheogens, then potentially a first step looks like doing a land acknowledgement, like when you open a conference. But I think that's just the first step. What we're hoping to provide are is an inspiration to align with that their self-actualization is in fact our self-actualization, that we can only do this together. And that if we are going to continue our work in the psychedelic space, whether as facilitators or educators or caretakers in any way, business, owners in this space, podcasters, that it is our bare minimum to center and to care with our actions as much as possible the the lives of living people that still exist today, and the well-being and the land that we all belong to.
Thank you so much for those definitions that really bring clarity and kind of set the stage for the conversation that we can have today. And I think that that's really important. What you just summarized at the end is centering the care of our actions for the living people, the living Indigenous people today, who are still the caretakers, who are still at the front lines of the I don't even know how to say it. They're still at the front lines of that division between development and patriarchy and the historic past, because I think we often forget that even in the psychedelic, in the entheogenic communities, we hearken back to our Indigenous ancestors and traditions and lineages, but we kind of I don't hear a lot of the conversation being around the present day and the people who are currently at the front lines continuing this work, this caretaking for us. So I really appreciate that definition. I'm curious, I think it would be a good idea to make a distinction between decolonization and rematriation. I'm going to say that because I think there may be some overlap there, but I think there's also, distinctive differences.
Yeah, I think terms like decolonization definitely got picked up in social media contexts, right? With like, I mean, I was definitely guilty of it when I was really active. It was just like, how to decolonize parenting and decolonized parenting practices or decolonized food ways, right? And so, I mean, this is the process of unlearning, undoing, and unwinding the programming and conditioning installed by colonization. That's all that means.
Right.
Deprogramming, uninstalling all the systems that were put in place when the expansion across the West took place, and also in South America, and also in Asia, and also in Africa. I mean, decolonization is not just centered here in North America, but in fact, it's touched, every corner of every corner of every continent. And so it is yeah, it's there's to decolonize, and then there's this great podcast by an indigenous media company based in actually Canada as well, and they have Kim Tallbear on there often. I've really appreciated her as a teacher as well, but they talk about indigenizing too. Like there's decolonizing, which is like the first layer, which is you're starting to even identify what systems have been taught to you through religion or socializing. And then you have this indigenizing practice, which is now like replacing the things that you have removed with these practices that are closer to, yeah, somewhat closer, right? I mean, as time goes on, we have these kinds of syncretizing, belief systems now that they're so interwoven, they're almost like together. But yeah, to decolonize is to just deprogram, unwind, untie the knot.
Right. So almost like it could be like a first step.
It's absolutely very
Yeah.
close to first step. Yeah, we need to kind of understand what have we learned about relationships? What have we learned about how we consume? What do we learn about our food ways? What do we learn about the way that we interact with the natural world? So that's a great start. And I would also like to say that um, colonization didn't just happen to everyone except Europe. In fact, it happened because it happened in Europe. it happened to me because it happened to you. When I talk to like my Christian friends, or I talked to this brother, he's a Seventh-day Adventist for like 5 generations in the United States. And he's like under the assumption that he cannot dance, right? He's like, oh, I don't, I like the way you move because you move so freely in your body and you can dance. And, I envy that because I don't think that I can dance. And then we talked a little bit about it for some time there. And he told me that within Seventh-day Adventists, they're not encouraged to dance. And
Mm,
I'm like, wait a second, do you not know how to dance or have you been bred out of your ability to dance on purpose? It's not
yeah,
that white folks don't know how to dance. It's like they literally have had that stripped from them
right.
because of colonization to them. So if we're interested in histories of this in Europe, for my European relatives, I think it's really important to look at the work of Silvia Federici, who wrote this incredible book called Caliban and the Witch, and it was about the European witch trials in the 16th century and the movement towards like scientific reductionist rationalist thinking that severed the human population from its magical origin in Europe, how it separated and segregated women and people from land and the land commons in order to do what she called primary accumulation of wealth, which meant to accumulate all of the wealth necessary in order to install capitalism. So it's a really interesting point of view, and she lays out the groundwork for it because this happened here and because the system of church and state and mass incarceration. I mean, I call it like the Spanish Inquisition, more like the Spanish Acquisition, because when you could try someone as a heretic in Europe, you could also take their home, their land, and everything. And so it was like this amassing of and the removal of wealth, land from the common people, and the removal of the magical thinking mind, and ripped apart to shreds the consciousness of Europeans, that then they were able to install this system in a number of different places all over the world, including Asia, Africa, and quote unquote the New World. So I just want to include in European relatives in the conversation of decolonizing because it has to happen with you all as well.
Thank you so much for bringing that into the conversation and for acknowledging that. I think for many of us who are European descendants, we're just not sure where we fit into this conversation and also how to broach it, from a caring and ethical place. But I think if we can relate it also back to ourselves and accept that we also are, subjected to this, then it helps us to all work together on this rematriation, decolonization and rematriation. And it doesn't like other us. We're all in this together. And that's actually gives me full body goosebumps to be able to really position it in that way for those of us who are alienated ourselves from our own histories and how we've been affected by this. So that's
Yeah,
really, really
you are
important.
you are in this too.
Yeah, thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Mikaela, I'm curious about rematriation in the work that you specifically do as well. And I'm going to come back and kind of read your bio out just to put this in context. But I know before I do that, the question is going to be around particularly that you are a mushroom educator.
Mhm.
So coming back again to definitions, what does that mean for you, mushroom educator, and how it relates to rematriation as well. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with Mikaela, she's a mother. She is a mushroom educator, as I mentioned. She's a folk herbalist, a community organizer, ceremony facilitator, and citizen researcher with over a decade of experience in sacred earth medicine, full spectrum womb care, psychedelic family life, and advocacy for survivors of harm in the wellness community. Her work has been featured in Microdosing for Health, Healing and Enhanced Performance by our friends James Fadiman and Jordan Gruber, and the Psilocybin Handbook for Women. Thank you for Jennifer Chisek. And many major publications, podcasts, and news outlets. She remains a collaborator with organizations, families, and practitioners across the psychedelic field and is committed to being an instrument in the movement to rematriate entheogens. Of note are the movements that I would say Mikaela is a leader of, which would be Mothers of the Mushroom Citizen Research Project, and also Ma'at, which maybe you can speak to as well. So just putting this in the context of the work that you specifically do and how it relates to rematriation.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, and that's the thing. Our work is very interdisciplinary as often as we can. I think it's important to create a body of work that speaks to each other and that makes sense together and that is continuing this kind of thesis for the work of our life. And, um, you know, I see that this organization, the Flourish Academy, has always been about creating, accessible education and centering voices and, bringing the knowledge to the people wherever possible. And that is an important pillar of your work. And an important pillar of my work has been around absolutely reproductive justice. That is extremely important to me. The ability to choose to have a child, to not have a child, and then to raise that child in a peaceful, loving, kind environment, period. I mean, we all deserve that. And I think that really comes from not just my life as a mother, but like my life as a daughter of a survivor, and a daughter of immigrants, a daughter of, indigenous people, a daughter of Caribbean people and Mexican people, right? Like there is so much happening at the border right now that I just, people's ability to raise their own children and have families has been completely disrupted and has been disrupted for many hundreds and hundreds of years in this country. And so, like my work has to be a continuation of the story of my family. And so there's abortion in my family, there's sexual assault in my family, there's all kinds of these personal, stories that I think really inform like why I just, serve the way that I do. And you mentioned some things, mush womb for sure. So I want to name that, especially in this time of great censorship, which a lot of us are feeling deeply in these centralized social network systems like Instagram and TikTok, where a lot of us used to gather, or even, I remember the days of Clubhouse where, some people were retreating during COVID to talk about certain topics because you couldn't talk about them anywhere else. So it's like we've been navigating the censorship for many, many years. And at a certain point, when I was in my early stages with Clubhouse, I'd had a vision of calling a room that I had held every Monday for a year and a half, the Mushroom Temple. And it was a place for us moms to get together, sacred hoes to get together, people exploring the body with entheogens, people exploring sexuality with entheogens and menstruation and, reproductive care and those kinds of things. It was a really cool talking space for a long time. And when I started creating on socials and sharing my story out a little bit more through those mediums, the flagging was early. I mean, like you couldn't do hashtag psilocybin. Like there was a time when I was exploring TikTok and growing on there that I could write hashtag psilocybin and it was fine. And those videos would keep going, or I could say hashtag psychedelic mushrooms, hashtag psychedelic, hashtag trip sitter. Like there were words we could use at a time that over time you could no longer use. And so instead of saying mushroom, saying mush womb, right? It was like really like a helpful way to kind of stay relevant, to continue giving this education, which the education is the intersection of entheogenic life, right? Of altered states of consciousness, of ecstatic experience and womb, like the life of our bodies and not just the women's bodies, but like the body, everyone comes from the womb, everyone was born out of a womb, right? And so it relates to us all, and it's really centered in like sovereignty, consent, joy, bodily autonomy, and advocating for the lives of wombs everywhere, energetic or our mothers or our own. And so mush womb meant a lot in these early days because not only was it a way to navigate censorship, it was a way to build community, it was a way to code my work, Mushroom, together. I care about entheogens and I care about reproductive sovereignty and all the things that come with the body. So that really colored things for me in those early years, and it really kind of spawned out some different projects, like you mentioned, Mothers of the Mushroom. So out of that work within Mushroom and just talking about my own experience ingesting psilocybin while pregnant, there just wasn't very much information out there. And with the help of so many loving participants, Wendy included, James Fadiman, Jordan Groover, the hundreds of women who submitted their stories to that survey, we were able to just pull together a community-based like survey around the effects, um, the motivations, some outcomes. It's very rudimentary. I'm so humbled to like how humble this project is, and how it's such an earnest like starting point for a much grander, much more nuanced conversation. And I continue my work in full spectrum womb care. And when I say that, that means abortion advocacy, that means natural birth control, that means also birth keeping and supporting within, the education of what happens in gestation. I'm constantly a student of that. And so, yeah, Mothers of the Mushroom was really born out of this mush womb consciousness. Also, Ma'a, Matriarchal Alliance for Accountability and Transparency, it's definitely a seed. It's definitely a big seed that has sprouted in some ways and is the continuation of work around community-based disclosure projects for harm in the psychedelic and wellness community. And because of the intense risk of that kind of work, Ma'a and my work within it has definitely centered more direct services with survivors that are going through legal processes potentially, or that are dealing with or struggling with, being unable to share their stories because of gag orders or because of threat of defamation and things like that. And these survivors exist. These survivors have been harmed by larger organizations that we all know, these names that we all know, and where do they go? And so Ma'a is literally like, hey, I'll take a call for free. I will just be with you. Do you want a care package? Here's some herbs. Like, just know someone's out here. Um, and they believe you. And I think survivors don't even get that much. They get a resource list and then just dismissed. So Ma'a is hoping to do a little bit more than just a resource list and then dismiss, but just provide actionable, loving, and competent care because it's a really tricky slope with like legal changes, with coming forward and then trying to disclose to community in a way that's actually helpful for our future people. So Ma'a is that, Mothers of the Mushroom is that. I have supported with other educational efforts like the Ego-Sensual Trauma-Informed Herbalism and Advocacy training, where we take practitioners and journeyers alike through a curriculum that hopes to instill some practices around herbal care for survivors, song, non-culturally appropriated song carrying, so that they can actually have some good medicine in their medicine bottle. They can know how to make herbal remedies that are survivor centric. They can know a little bit about advocacy and community organizing, so that we can just expand the skills based within our community, so that we just have more trauma informed advocates to make our spaces safer. So just a little bit of the things that I've been up to. And then, the last thing I'll leave off of is just my personal work, as you mentioned, with facilitation and what does rematriation look like in those practices. There's basic things like having very accessible pricing, of course, journeying in a space where my family is close by, and so people being okay with the fact that my son might pop his head in and say hello, and letting and vetting people in that way that, yeah, they would be welcome in my home like that. And then of course to help to create an environment within the ceremonial context that helps a person situate their journey in the context of nature and the land. And so they come and bring non-monetary offerings and gifts for the land. They come and they pray with water and they wash themselves, and then they're asked to come and bring that to the land. They're taught, how to just give offerings to the land, how to sing, how to just take care of the earth, how to engage with fire in a good way. So it's just, a lot of the stuff that we are now thinking about incorporating later into the psychedelic experience, for me, is the elementary part of the stepping stones actually necessary that need to be in place before you even get to those spaces. But we're all kind of doing it all backwards. in fact, it is important for us to know how to tend to a fire and sit down and know how to be respectful. It is important for us to know how to have a gifting economy. It's important for us to know how to share food with one another. It's important for us to know how to just sit down and listen to the wind and know where the directions are wherever you're at, and know how to tell where the sun is and how to tell where the sun is setting. There's these basic things that I think children within communities that maintain these traditions know, and that there's just so much more understanding going into these spaces. But at this time, people are just finding this later in life and now having to build all these systems. So in my own practice, I like to just bring these elementary parts, so that we also build a context around, yeah, their journey and experience is not just an individual effort, but it's like an effort of helping a person orient to a closer to the land worldview. So those are some of the ways that my work shows.
Oh,
Rematriating and Entheogens shows up in the work that I do and how they're related.
yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. It really puts into a concrete context, that the way that you're leading with rematriation. Um, oh, I had a question right on the tip of my tongue. Let me just see if I can
Yeah.
come
And
get
I
that.
gotta say,
Oh,
we used to do this panel at conferences that I just loved so much. It was called It's Not Too Late to Rematriate. And we did it once in San Francisco. And I believe we did it one other time too in Oakland. And I just loved this conversation because often Native women and Native people generally get kind of placed into the conference at the beginning and at the end. So they do the like nice smoke, cleansing in the beginning, and they maybe sing a song, and then they do the acknowledgement, and then they just kind of like disappear. And then the whole conference happens, and then they come back up at the end and they're like, paraded around, like, look at how much equity we're doing. And so I always just found that to be really performative and really interesting. And I was like, how cool would it be to actually get, together some of my like most badass like Native homegirls in the psychedelic community, Sochiache, or yeah, Kat Kerner, or Coyote, who's from the Bay Area, and yeah, Coyote. Also, who's the other sister that I care for so deeply? Oh yes, Ikutsi, right? So like we'd pull some people together and have a really dope conversation about the things we're seeing and the things that are disappointing to us, and like why our perspectives matter, and how, like, you know what is it like that we're just put in the beginning and the end, and we're really not like put all together. Maybe it's like one person giving a presentation, but you're very hard pressed to see like four Native women on the stage having a conversation with each other about the things we know from our communities, sharing notes, like understanding samenesses and differences, and then also just having a talking circle about like the things that we wish would change about our space if they just were down to listen to us. And I was like, yeah, let's have that conversation, because that seems really like it's missing. We like to imagine, the thoughts of Native people, but they often get put as like the token on a panel, but we hardly get ever put together for us to all be a collective voice. And
mm,
so I just, I really miss those days. I really miss, yeah, when there was a lot of like smaller conferences kind of happening, and I had a little bit more pull because I had a big social media following, but now like very little people care because I don't. But it was cool to be able to have some pull so that I could put together some panels so that we could hear our voices all together in a space, because it's rare and I don't know why. And so it's been nice lately, since getting deplatformed, to just actually go to Sweat, actually go. There's a huge powwow coming up in April, the Gathering of the Nations. Like there's Native people gathering from all over the world, being in joy, being alive together. This is not antiquity. This is like right now.
remember.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, remembering in the definition of literally putting body parts back together, like remember
Yeah.
to come back. So no, it's a beautiful effort. It's a humble effort. I'm seriously a student of this work forever and ever. And I try to do my best to not position myself like some kind of like expert in this field, but just, someone who's at least spent a little bit of time thinking about this.
And you have your lived experience to really complement what you're learning as well. But I think what you said is also true, that we are all forever learners of this. Just for our viewers and our listeners, mushwomb.love is where you can find Mikaela's work, where you can find out more about Mothers of the Mushroom, and the services and offers that Mikaela has as well. Some beautiful, beautiful offerings that are absolutely free of charge as well. And one thing that you just brought up, Mikaela, is, having these panel discussions where you're able to, as Indigenous women, to come together and to talk about, what you wish would change or would be changed. And I kind of want to talk about that now, is like, what do you see that you would like to see change, that needs to change in order to rematriate entheogens? And then for us, like we talked about this being an actionable
Mhm.
conversation and podcast. So let's talk about action steps. Like, what can we do as facilitators, as educators, but also as people who are just maybe in relationship with entheogens in any way, shape, or form?
Absolutely. And I just want to say thank you to the people who stuck around for this conversation. I think that's an actionable step right there. Like literally just sitting and listening is a huge part of, expanding your bandwidth on a beautiful Friday morning. So I just want to give thanks for you and your, attention and literally paying attention to, some of these words. So I just want to thank you all for that. And, you know, what do we wish? What do we wish? I can't say I'm only going to speak from my perspective. Um, because and also my struggles are different, right, than someone who's living at Rastafari Indigenous Village, in Jamaica and Montego Bay, who is watching, this Chinese contractor come and rip up like 100-year-old trees and soil and muddy the water in their neighborhood, haven't been able to hold a retreat in almost a year because no one can access the property. Like that's a very different level of need than I have. I'm very privileged. So I just want to give, continue to pour out like that there's folks that are in immediate like need, and there's folks that are like, yeah, literally pushing up against machines. It's like humans, it's Black Indigenous Jamaicans and machines. It's just such a horrifying image. And so I asked first man, I asked him, what do you all need right now from someone who's like far off? And he's like, yeah, funding. So for sure, like funding these organizations so that they can keep their doors open as educational spaces, because they cannot make money doing, retreats and in-person services right now, because their roads are literally blockaded by major construction. That's what it actually looks like. Talking to other people, my teacher, my friend, my business collaborator, Brittany Jade Wilson of the Original Instruction School, one of my deep teachers, lives in Pucallpa, Peru, talking to maestras that sing and hold ayahuasca ceremony, even at remotely good, well-meaning ayahuasca centers. Like these are ones that actually pay well and actually treat their maestras well. They're like, trying to sell their wares, like trying to sell their mantas and their tapestries and all the art, the artistry and the crafts, because that is actually how those maestras get direct money, because the center is only paying them so much. And it's like people in their lives die, people in their lives, they get illnesses and they still have to sit and sing because people paid for a ceremony, like that's what it's looking like on the ground in some of these spaces. And so it's like, how do you help directly like that? It's like you buy direct from the maestras, and it's like important because there's a delineation between, working with like nonprofit organizations and like doing, direct aid and doing, yeah, mutual aid and those kinds of things. And I've just been in conversation, yeah, with my friend and teacher Brittany about just the difference in the impact of working with an NGO and then doing direct mutual aid with like a direct family. And that actually is a very actionable step. Like, befriend an Indigenous person in your neighborhood. Like, we all know the names, right? Piscataway and, um, yeah, Squalish, right? Like, we have these terms, but these are nations of humans. Do we know anyone from these communities? are we literal friends with any families in the native communities where we fucking live? Sorry, excuse me. So, that's an actionable step is don't just say the name, learn the names of the people in those places. Go to their resource centers, go check out like do they have a women's resource center on the res? Like, do you know what I mean? Like learn where the res is. It's just not that hard. Like befriend native
Make it
folks and
personal.
support them directly. Because yeah, I learned about like March of the Dimes, for example, and it's like, yeah, for every dollar you give, 10% goes to the cause, 90% is administrative. So yeah, you can give to an NGO, you can give to a conservation fund, but there's people in Wirikuta that are fighting silver mining, that they're in the peyote desert and trying to preserve and make sure that the peyote is not uprooted by the black market, or the narcos, or getting like dug up because they want to like extract minerals from the oil, like from the soil. And so it's like things like that is like get connected to an action that's currently taking place, because there are many, there's missing and murdered indigenous women, two-spirit, trans community. Get connected to the queer community in your neighborhood. Like go go do community service. It sounds so like not sexy, but it's so practical. Like go do community work and engage with folks that are been marginalized by the system. And you might run into some native folks in those circles, and be humble and like offer your skills. Hey, you like are a digital marketer because you run a psychedelic company. Cool. Like help with a brand, like, whatever, like offer your digital services, help use your platform to platform other folks that might not have one. So you do a good job of doing this in this space for sure. But I think it is very simply befriend native people directly and ask them what they need. And then have the good boundaries, and then, check in with your own resources yourself and be like, what do I have capacity to share and give? There was an example of this. Like I was at a Black owned birth center here in San Diego. I'm doing a birth keeping training led by an indigenous sister. She's a traditional Mexican midwife. Even that alone, who you decide to learn from, pay an indigenous person for the same education as you would get somewhere else, right? That's a way of being supportive. And so we're walking through this midwifery center, birth center, and I saw this incredible book. And it is, I want to get the name of it for you because I was just so moved by this incredible the fact that they made this book. And I was like, how did we not learn about this in school? Is It's called the Indigenous Women's Health Book Within the Sacred Circle. And it's just this gorgeous manual that I'm flipping through, and I'm like, whoa, like education built and created by Native people is so soothing to my nervous system to learn from and to be a student of. So I'm just flipping through all the art and the pages, and I'm like, wow, this is incredible. Cool. Go home, go look it up. How do I buy this? Okay, Thrift Books has it for $80. Okay, what would have been easy for me? Sure, I could have just put my credit card in and bought it and then been done with it, and Thrift Books would have got the money. But I was like, hey, who actually published this? Who's holding this? Okay, there's a native like center in South Dakota, and there's a phone number on the bottom of the website. Cool. Pick up my phone and literally call the center. They answer. I talked to them this morning. And I'm sitting there talking and hearing them talk to each other. And I'm like, hey, I saw this book in a birth center. Like, I want to carry it. And I was like, how do I order five? And they're like, let us get back to you. I just found out they had a crowdfund me because their building burnt down in a fire. I'm just like, there's shit going on in these spaces that, maybe I don't think 5 books will do a difference, but it's going to do a lot better than giving it to Thrift Books and calling it a day. It means going that extra mile. It means going to the source code. It means not learning through telephone. It's just like putting yourself in there. And so I'm not here to, try to be too preachy, but I really do feel like it's about being a good friend. It's about showing up for people. It's about, listening in and showing up and being like, yeah, I'd like to help, you know? And yeah, being respectful of what spaces are yours and what spaces are not yours, you know? I'm not going to say like sweat lodge is just for indigenous folks only. There's a lot of inclusive sweat places to sweat. But if it's the difference between a native person having room to sit and sweat, and you're seeing that, like, oh, there's not enough room in the sweat, and like it's your turn, and maybe you paid and you feel like because you paid that you deserve to be there, but there's someone who maybe like you know, this is their tradition, like give up your seat. It's just, it's a kindness like that. So yeah, it takes a lot of, humbling, and those are just some of the things, like give your space up on the bus, for a native person or a black person or anyone really, like just become less self-important and build a connection. Don't be afraid to get on the phone, call the center, ask them what they need, put your hours in and learn directly, and ask native people, how can you be of service?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm really hearing overarchingly is step away from the terminology and make it just practical and personal. Personal, like come from your heart. I like the way that you summarized it as basically like be a good friend, be someone who listens and learns and is humble and open and um, takes the opportunity to center, the indigenous folk and the people to who we owe so much of, where we are at now and how we are as a people now. Just make it be a good friend. It's a good like
Be a good friend,
bottom line.
be an ally, be an accomplice. I love that word, be an accomplice
Yeah,
in,
really
you
like
know,
make it
self-actualization. Yeah.
practical, as in like what you were saying, like listen to the source. What do you need? How can I, from what I have to give, how can I support and be part of it?
Absolutely. It's not that hard. And it's really fulfilling and it's fun. And I'm just really grateful that I don't know, there's parts of me that I guess are just really humbled by, so I come from a detribalized situation and that happens a lot. There's a lot of kids that, maybe they had like a native grandma or like, but we're completely divorced from our practices, right? Like we, for one reason or another, have acculturated to American life, or, have lost our language. We don't speak even Spanish. Like we're so just removed from our contact points. And it's hard because we're also trying to put pieces back together. So it just, it's breadcrumbs. I just want to say thank you to, the people doing, and I'm in Southern California, so we have a different kind of like, native community. We're very Chicano down here. We're very like Mexican American type way of doing it. So like we have curanderismo and we have as Dance Azteca. We have LA, which is a very mestizo city. So there's like black and brown and, that mixed culture. And, checking out cultural observances and like really just, yeah, I would just want to say thank you to these cultural centers in my neighborhood, like Chicano Park, for example, that for 52 years has had a claim stake in a region of San Diego that is like, this is a Chicano neighborhood. Like we have a cultural center. We do danza for Dia de Muerto. Like we maintain our traditions. And yeah, there's a lot of shit in this that is not super helpful, right? Like eating the chamoy and like the certain foods that are not good for us. So I'd also recommend tapping into your own relationship to the history of your area. How did your family get there? What was the impact of like your arrival? Who's trying to maintain neighborhoods through the resistance to gentrification? I mean, gentrification is neocolonialism. I know we all like our nice planters and the nice malls in our neighborhoods, but that is displacing people. Dodger Stadium displaced a whole Cuban neighborhood. You know what I mean? It's like we have to remember that we're here because we're here because we pushed someone out to be here, and getting very real and very tangible with that. And to not just let the guilt, like, it's not about the guilt. I don't need folks, it doesn't make sense for folks to just feel guilty. That's not the point. It's about like acknowledging all of the actions together and doing better, knowing all the things that It's not about ignoring and it's not about feeling guilt. It's about knowing all of the things and still walking together. So we're not going to get anywhere by ignoring all the things. So I just, yeah, want to say thanks to all the folks that have been preserving, these ways of life. They're still here. It's so beautiful too. Yeah. And participate and tap into please your own indigeneity. It's so hard. It's so hard to remember like where we come from and who we are if we don't know our own history. But if we can try to Okay, I'm Welsh. Great. What are some plants from that neighborhood? What are
Mhm.
some instruments from that neighborhood? Like, just try. Your body remembers. Your body totally remembers. And there are some things that are intrinsic to the human family, what Brittany J. Wilson calls the golden thread that ties us all together. Tap in with your relationship to the elements. Can you build a fire?
Mhm.
Can you even build a fire? Do you know any songs?
Yeah.
Do you know any songs, that you can sing with your heart, that you can carry with you in your native language? Try to learn, try to find teachers. So it's a personal work and it's a friendship work. So I would say I'd like to also from the macro, like go help people in Jamaica. Like, it seems big stuff. There's also these personal, you know, actions like learning plants from your region and learning fire from your region and getting really hyper local. So I hope that this also inspires a personal inquiry to like consider ancestry, to consider your own native homelands and to dream about them and to try to remember them too, because a lot of us are strangers to this land. A lot of us are strangers to this land.
Yeah, that's so helpful, Michaela, and so practical. Just the little things that we can do to restore our relationship with the land. And I remember my mom used to always have this saying. She'd say, "If this is your land, where are your stories? Like, where are your stories with the land? So make stories with the land. If you don't have ones that you can pull on, start making stories with the land and learning the land." I
Yeah.
want to continue to talk about resources for people. You've thrown in a lot. We're going to have to go through the show notes and make sure we have all the resources listed and the links for everybody. But it's something I want to come back to. But of course, what makes this different from other podcasts is the community conversation and the community support here. And so I just want to open this up now to everybody. I'm going to just unpin us so that we're not dominating the conversation at the moment. Oh, I unpinned you. How do I unpin me? Okay, there we go. Okay, we are together. We are all together here, friends. First of all, Wendy, thank you so much for being here, for being my partner in Psychedelic Revelations podcast, for all the back end stuff that you do while I'm busy talking, but also for all the work that you've done alongside Mikaela with the Mothers of the Mushroom Project. And your own rematriation that you're bringing into the space as well. And I just wanted to turn the conversation over to you before we open it up to the broader community.
Yeah, first off, thank you. Thank you both. Like I'm like, I don't know, who do I start with? I'm like, I am so thankful for both of you and the gifts that you both bring me. And I want to say thank you, Mikaela. I'll start with you, Mikaela. Dana, I tell you all the time. So like we'll stick with Mikaela. Um, obviously, like I've gotten to know you, pretty well, working with you on on the tech stuff on Mothers of the Mushroom and kind of collecting that data. And I just want to say it was really interesting because when I saw the topic, I'm like, oh, this is gonna be great. I thought it was going to go in a different direction. I'm super excited. I'm super happy about like the direction it went in, but it was also like, wow, like there's like, because there's so much to this topic of rematriation. I really thought the conversation was going to be around like how women are the medicine holders and how like traditionally we've been the ones that carry the wisdom of how to use the different medicines, um and
Oh,
how
we'll get there. We got 30 minutes. I think we could just get that in.
and it actually ties to something that you were saying right now, Dana, about like how your mom said the thing about the land, like the memories of the land. And it little side background. So my grandma was um, disabled, but she, long story short, she was like one of the last, she was like the first woman to not be like an like an indentured servant or whatever they were called, like from my family. And so they still worked for the people that used to like own them. But you understand what I'm saying, but she because she like worked for them, she worked the land, like, and she was really into botany. Um, and so it was just very interesting. I learned so much about just the land and plants from my grandma. My mom was like a chemical engineer, and so she understood like chemistry and how things would kind of combine together. And so like I learned very different kind of components of the earth like from them, and I did not learn these same kind of things from the men in my life. Not to say that there aren't men that don't know this, obviously, but I just find it very interesting how even on a very patriarchal culture family, like my family was very like besides me saying that, just know that it was very like, you know, I'm a 13th generation American, so my family's been here on this land for a very long time. And it's really hard for me because I don't feel very connected to where my DNA, like originated from, because I'm so disconnected from it. And like I feel it, like I feel very connected to the land here more. Not to say I'm not, I feel connected to all land, honestly. Like I've traveled around a lot of the world, and I do find that when you travel, like wherever you are, you now are a part of that land. Like that's always felt very true to me. But as I said, there's so many things that I thought we were gonna where this is gonna go, and I'm just really thankful for it. I do also want to say I put a couple links to the books that you talked about from Sylvia. And then I also found the bookstore that you talked about for South Dakota in our community. So in the episode discussion where we post this, they're there right there, and links to you as well. So just thought I'd throw that in there. And just thank you so much. And I don't even know where I want to go. There's like so much to talk about with you always.
Well, I want to respond to what you said about, mothers being the caretakers of these knowledge bases and systems. And it was like what was really centered in the Mothers of the Mushroom Project was like the stories of moms and the real lived experience and the observations of mothers, because that is how we know anything, is the lived experience and observation over time. And that is what creates best practices. That is what creates the right combination of plants in the jungle. That is what creates the systems and protocols that keep people safe. And so the rematriation process and restoring, the livelihood of Indigenous folks is so that we can preserve the knowledge that is held in those spaces, because they know a lot about how to caretake this land, the songs that animate certain areas of this land, like, how to keep the beat going here. Because yes, 13 generations is a long time, and I'm like 13,000 years is also a really long time. And so, it's like, yes, we need to preserve the lives, because another resource, Navajo Grandma on YouTube, right? Sharing language, sharing recipes, sharing stories, preserving culture, the kitchen, the home, the foraging grounds. This is where stories are translated. These are where the cultural knowledge is transmitted. And so, if there is not land, and if the lives of women are being obstructed, then we cannot continue. And so, rematriation, I think, directly relates to the preservation of cultural knowledge, because if you don't have land and you don't have a good way of life to live, then how can we pass our stories along, you know? And so, I thank you for bringing that, because cultural stewardship is an important feature of rematriation, and how we hold these medicines with some kind of context and integrity and in their, appropriate space. And I think Johns Hopkins like put their psilocybin capsules like into a boboshkomi, which is where they burn copal inside, and then they gave it to people, and I was like, that's cute, but that's for burning copal. It's like we have these like weird things we're trying, but no one's getting the like grandma to say, hey, that's like not how you do that. And it's not to shame you. It's to like, you just don't know. So let me teach you how to do this right. So yeah, let Native women lead, let also mothers lead, you know what I mean? I think we need more mother archetype in the space of psychedelics. Like, where are the moms in the boardrooms? Like, where are we in the steering committees? Where are we talking about how we design psychedelic conferences so that they're more family inclusive? You know, at MAPS, there was like a room, a four-walled room where all the kids were housed, and they were just playing like red light, green light across the room with no windows. I'm like, okay, sure, this is including families, but like this isn't actually enriching the kids in the subject matter that we're all learning. It's not including them in the conversation. So, you know, mothers leading, mothers like performing therapy, mothers researching. I loved researching with you, Wendy. Like the way your brain works is just phenomenal. And so I'm just like, yeah, we bring this touch that the space needs dearly and deeply, and it's missing. And so preserving, restoring the respect of women and our voices and our contributions is absolutely paramount to the success of this movement. I don't think we're going to do it without mothers, and we're not going to do it without women's voices, period. And if we're going to like change and indigenize any system, we need to look at misogyny and the way that misogyny is replicated through our relationships and replicated literally in businesses and organizations within the psychedelic movement.
Absolutely, 100%. Oh my gosh, thank you. That turned into a really juicy little share there between Wendy and Mikaela. Thank you so much for yeah, bringing that into the conversation too, Wendy. I wasn't sure where this conversation was going to go, but I think we were touching on some really pertinent topics that we all need to bring to the forefront. So. We have a few people in our community audience today, and as always, we like to offer up the opportunity for questions or for shares, for stories, for support, anything that might be on your mind for any of you who are here in our live audience with us today. So I'll just pause for a minute and see if anyone wants to, just feel free to unmute yourself and come into the conversation.
I'll come back off while we see if someone like will raise their hand and come off video. Um, I what part of that conversation first off, thank you. Yes, I do completely acknowledge like 13,000 is definitely, a very long time. And I know from like doing the ancestry thing, like I've moved all over and there's different pieces of there. So it's always a strange thing. And like, you brought up there's two things I want to say. Like one, like you brought up like the guilt thing. It's definitely an interesting thing because guilt is, and it's not just me, it's a lot of people that I know in a lot of different religions. Guilt is a way of getting children to behave. And when we are now forced to look at an aspect, um, a lot of people don't know how to deal with guilt. They don't know how to deal with they don't know how to take something like, oh, I've done something wrong and keep it there. Instead, they internalize it and say, oh, you're saying I'm wrong. And I think this is always a really big part of the conversation, especially with like decolonizing. And this is why I'm bringing it back to like what I was kind of thinking rematriation was going to come into a different kind of concept, which you did touch on, where like decolonizing is getting rid of something, but even just understanding like neuroscience, you can't just stop a habit. You actually have to replace it. And the way thoughts work, like you have to replace the thought. You have to actively kind of choose a new thought and start practicing towards that new thought. And I love this conversation about, maybe the answer is, instead of choosing a more patriarchal thought, maybe learning from indigenous people, actively seeking out how they are choosing to approach things, so you can now start choosing new ways of thinking, because that leap from coming from something bad has happened, like an action that I've taken maybe is harmful, and learning how to not um, internalize that is just not a skill that most people have. And it just creates arguments and it creates disconnect. And I think that is part of rematriation, because like as a mom, we start, hopefully most of us are learning how to help our kids not feel so guilty and so shameful. I think that that's part of my rematriation for myself, is learning how to not take that learned behavior and kind of choosing a new way to show up as a mother, as a woman, as a person of this world. um, and then I do have one other thing if no one else comes up. But I want to hear your thoughts on
Mikaela, anything you want to respond to that before we open up?
Yeah, I would love to say that the opposite of patriarchy is not matriarchy. In fact, the opposite of patriarchy is not producing the same system just with women in charge. It's like a different way of being. And so I really like the model of the work of Riane Eisler. So Riane Eisler is this incredible thinker. She's still alive, which is amazing, and she's still teaching. And she wrote this incredible book called The Chalice and the Blade, which essentially uses like archaeology and history to make the claim that before we learned how to all become dominators and only the strong survive, and that you have to undercut people in order to get resources, that we had a partnership model. So instead of delineating between patriarchy bad and evil and war hungry and all the things, and then matriarchy good and pastoral and like collaborative, she delineates between dominator models, the models that promote social order through fear of and threat of violence and death and scarcity, and partnership model, which promotes social order through positive reinforcement and collaboration and care. And the hierarchy systems of earned merit and not power over, but power with. And that had a more egalitarian kind of ethos about it. And so I really don't do this patriarchy, matriarchy thing per se, even though I use words like rematriation. It is maternity, it is relating to women, but it is not just to usurp power from men and then to put myself there. I don't want equality, I want equity. There's a difference, right? Not just having exactly what they have, but just women in charge. I want equity, which like centers our talents and gifts and like sees us as, just as important in a different way. And so I love the work of Riane Eisler because Chalice and the Blade really sets the foundation for that way of thinking. And then she wrote a secondary book called Sacred Pleasure, which she applies these teachings to the body, to our relationship with our also internal voice, that programming, our relationship to pleasure, our relationship to sexuality, relationships, and those other things, and how we replicate those systems of domination or partnership. And so, yeah, I would just love to second your thought about what your rematriation step is changing the way that you program your process around shame and how you do differently and how you remodel and how you literally make a new brain and a new body with not choosing out of shame and choosing instead pleasure, growth, collaboration, and working together. So I definitely echo that. And if anyone is interested in framework, I would definitely point to Riane Eisler, Chalice and the Blade, and then a second book, Sacred Pleasure.
Thank you for those resources. I'm writing them down. And as we said, hop over to our community, the Flourish Academy community from psychedelic-revelations.com, and we're going to have discussion, post episode discussion with all of these resources listed there. I think it was a really important conversation, that just that last piece in particular about like, we're not saying repatriation versus rematriation. These are different, and just like looking at it through the lens that you were like, dominator versus partnership relationship, and power with versus power over. But yeah, so thank you. That was really important clarification. I think like a bottom line that we need to would have been remiss for us to not clarify that. So thank you so much. For those of you who are here with us it is your opportunity, and we'll just pause for a moment, see if anybody would like to come off mute. You are more than welcome, even if it's just to say hi and cultivate community. One thing I've learned so much working in this space is the power of silence and being okay with it. The sacred pauses. And being a podcast, we don't want to pause too long. So I am going to turn it back over to you, Mikaela. You have been providing us with so many resources throughout this entire conversation of books, of resources, of people. And there we have one of our listeners there, and we'll get you to kind of go through a few more of those resources first. But we'll pause here and see if Z's iPhone might like to join the conversation. It's always hard to find that mute button when you're on your phone. There you go.
Yes, thank you. It was beautiful and I learned a lot and lots to think about.
Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for being brave to come on camera and to chime in with us. I mean, this is really what we're trying to cultivate here is a very safe and welcoming and supportive community, and that's one step that you just took for our whole community, just by being brave to join us in this way and just to say hello. So thank you. You're so welcome with us.
Gratitude. Thank you.
Okay, Mikaela, let's wrap up with a few resources and also just like any kind of anything we didn't get around to bringing into the conversation that you think is important, or any last words you might like to leave us with.
Uh, um, yeah, give thanks. It's about to be Indigenous Peoples Day on Monday for us in the United States. So yeah, please don't celebrate Christopher Columbus. Like bare minimum. Um, consider that. And also like kind of embarrassing because I'm Italian as well. And so he's Italian. And so I'm like, hey, having to grapple with these complex histories, right? These are complex histories, right? I should feel shameful for being Italian because he was Italian, but here we are, like, still doing the work. So it's like, yeah, think about Indigenous people on Monday and every day if you can. And we have some holidays, Thanksgiving, consider that. Consider what we think about that, how we consider that here in North America. Um, consider, yeah, consider observances around, yeah, your own relationship to this holiday season and consumerism and consumption. Like, what does that mean? Maybe make a gift for someone, like maybe have offerings of a different kind, I know it's like so easy to hit the wish list on Amazon or whatever, of course, but like, maybe consider like your participation in relationships during this time of year, as we head into some of us going into like the holidays in North America. Also just, yeah, I hope that people can refer back to some of these like actionable steps, and think about, the things that you've been taught and ask about where did you learn that thing? And does that thing, kind of enforce like feelings of, yeah, shame and feeling small and power over, you know? Do some of your thoughts engage with like power with and like working through it and striving to be better? I hope that some of these books and references continue to, yeah, color your worldview a little bit. I'm a student of feminist histories, and so I've been very grateful to be surrounded by people much smarter than myself. So please, like, don't take my word as gold. Be critical always. I'm 31 years old. I'm a baby. I shouldn't even be talking among like sister circles and elder women. So I'm just really grateful. I just want to say thank you to, yeah, you letting the youth speak. You know what I mean? Like you letting young people come up and share from their humble opinion. So I just keep touching the ground, keep watering your plants, like keep singing to these trees. Nature sings for us, and I think nature really misses our contribution to the symphony of life. So use that voice, sing, hum, dance, do your thing. Because these things are welcome and they make this place a really beautiful place to be.
Oh, thank you so much, Mikaela. What a lovely lovely way to kind of send us off on this beautiful Friday. Thank you for a very uplifting and inspiring conversation. A lot of times when we get into these conversations, they can be they can focus more on the shame and the guilt rather than the inspiration and the practicalities of how we can change. So I really, really appreciate that so much. I'm looking forward to our conversation here next week. It's on microdosing and parenthood, insights from research, lived experience, and community with Naomi. Oh, Wendy, I forget her last name right now.
Colson,
Yes, there you
that's the
go.
homegirl. I better be on that call. I love her. She's great.
Yes, come and join us. I actually won't be here. I'm going to be going on retreat with one of my teachers, Sarah Hope. And she is another person who I really respect and admire in this space. In fact, at psychedelic-revelations.com, you can find a past episode with Sarah, her talking about healing disconnection, 10 ways to create right relationship with Indigenous wisdom traditions. So feeding well into this conversation as well. And the following week, we have the chair of psychedelics in recovery coming to talk about using these beautiful sacred medicines as tools in recovery. We got a whole awesome lineup coming up. So come and join us in community. It's our mission to provide free and accessible psychedelic education and a welcoming community for all. So thank you once again, Mikaela, for being part of this. And I just want to go back to that comment about your age and really acknowledge that wisdom and age are not the same. I really appreciate your wisdom that you're bringing to this space and the good fight that you're bringing. Yeah. So thank you once again, everybody. And Wendy, do you want to take us out of the room for today?
Of course. I just want to say thanks to the people over in Clubhouse, like stayed through
Thank
till the end,
you.
listening. I really appreciate you guys being there. So,
For the
um,
OGs of the Flourish Academy
yeah, sure.
podcast.
It is some of the OGs over there. Um, so oh yeah, how to take out the room. Um, everyone who's listening, on the audience, I invite you to follow along. Everyone who's here, I invite you to unmic right now if you're up with us in the Zoom, and let's all take a big deep breath in together. And now let's sigh or bow it out.
And with the love and the support of the Flourish Academy behind you, may you all go forth and flourish.